Okay, so we've all heard of K-pop, K-dramas, K-food, the whole K-wave, right? But what about K-democracy? Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful push for political reform that could seriously reshape South Korea's future.
I mean, it's a feeling a lot of us have had, right? You go out, you cast your vote, you do your part, but then the results come in and something just feels off. Like it doesn't really reflect what people want. Well, in South Korea, that frustration has been put on blast thanks to a really controversial trick called the satellite party. So, what is this democratic loophole exactly? Well, picture this. A huge, major political party goes and creates a tiny, separate party. It's a party in name only, really. And the whole point is to gain the system to snatch up these proportional representation seats, seats that are supposed to give smaller, more diverse voices a chance to be heard. Instead, they just funnel those seats right back to the big party. It's a tactic that totally undermines the whole spirit of the law. As you can imagine, this whole thing has kicked off a huge national conversation about the future of K-democracy. It's not really a question of if the system needs to be fixed anymore. The real question, the urgent one, is how do we build a fairer one? And at the heart of this call for reform is a pretty simple idea. Real change has to be based on actual democratic principles, the ones laid out in the Constitution. It has to be bigger than the short-term, selfish goals of political parties just trying to win the next election. And that, of course, leads us to the central conflict, the big question. Who should be in the driver's seat for this change? Do we leave it to the politicians who are already in the system, or should the power be put into the hands of citizens and experts? And this chart, well, it lays out the two very different paths forward. On one side, you have reform driven by the parties themselves, which, let's be honest, usually focuses on getting an electoral edge and keeping things pretty much the same. On the other side, you have a principled approach, one that's guided by the Constitution and powered by citizens, aiming to convince the parties to make real, meaningful change. So what's a concrete solution being floated? A political reform committee. But now, this wouldn't be your typical group of politicians sitting around a table. Instead, it'll be made up of political scientists, legal experts, the people who actually study this stuff for a living, and, most importantly, everyday citizens. Their job? To research the best way forward and build an argument so strong that the established parties just can't ignore it. And hey, if you think this is just some academic theory, think again. It's already been put into practice. A great recent example was the 500-person assembly hosted by the broadcaster KBS in 2023. It brought regular citizens, scholars, and journalists together for a big public debate on the election system. It proved that this kind of citizen-led reform isn't just possible in Korea, it can be super effective. But here's the thing about any major reform. For it to actually stick, it needs pretty much everyone to get on board. That means the process can't be about shutting people out. It has to be about bringing everyone in. Which brings up a really thorny question. If some parties are the ones who exploited the rules and created these satellite parties in the first place, why on earth should they get a seat at the table to fix the problem? The thinking here is, well, it's subtle, but it's really important. It's not about pardoning anyone or giving them a pass. It's about making sure the final fix is strong and actually lasts. By including them in the conversation, you give them a chance to take part in building a system that prevents anyone, including themselves, from pulling the same stunt again. It's about future-proofing the democracy. So how do you actually ban these things for good? Well, there are three main paths being proposed. Number one, the National Assembly could just pass a law to get rid of them. Simple enough. 2, put it directly to the people with a national referendum. Or 3, give the National Election Commission the power to just say, nope, sorry, and refuse to register these fake parties from the get-go. Now, for anyone thinking that this kind of deep, citizen-powered change is just a pipe dream, well, we need to talk about New Zealand. It's an incredible case study. Back in the early 90s, the people of New Zealand pushed back hard against a political system that didn't want to change. This timeline shows you how they did it. In 92, they had a referendum to ditch their old winner-take-all system. Then a second binding referendum in 93 to pick a new one. And by 1996, boom, they were holding elections under a brand new set of rules, a much fairer system. And listen to this, the voice of the people was just overwhelming. In that first vote, a whopping 84.7% of voters chose to scrap the old system. You just can't argue with numbers like that. That's a clear, undeniable demand for change. And the momentum just kept going.
The very next year, a solid majority, 53.9%, voted to bring in the new, more proportional system. The people spoke, and their democracy was literally transformed because of it.
So, all of this brings us to the ultimate goal, right? What's the big vision behind all these reforms? What kind of democracy are we even talking about for South Korea?
Let's be real. Right now, the National Assembly doesn't look much like the nation it represents. It's heavily dominated by a very small club of privileged professions. We're talking fewer than 10, with lawyers being a big one.
The goal, the dream, is to turn the National Assembly into a true hall of the people. An assembly where teachers and farmers and small business owners and tech workers and artists, people from the more than 10,000 different jobs that actually make up the country, all have a real voice.
And so, that brings us right back to where we started. The story of New Zealand proves, without a doubt, that when citizens are determined, they can overcome political resistance and fundamentally reshape their democracy. So the final question is, can that same people power be the engine that drives the next chapter of K-democracy?